Before I get to the medical pro in studio, I do have to mention another medical pro. I wanted to mention our friend Dr. Christine Pickup at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. Dr. Pickup, by the way, is the only independently owned, what you'd call hearing health center in southern Idaho, and she has been working for many, many years over in the Mini-Cassia really region. And one reason you might actually choose her office is because of trust. As a certified audiologist and independent business owner, Dr. Pickup will never use deceptive advertising to sell a hearing aid. No bait and switch, no seeking participants to try a type of aid. At Mount Harrison Audiology, you'll be offered your choice of brands and a recommendation based on your goals. Local and independent, you can trust Dr. Pickup with your hearing and your budget. Call to schedule your appointment today, 208-312-0957. I wanted to point out her office is not assembly line medicine, and neither might be your pronunciation, is Tripp Family Medicine in Twin Falls. It is dedicated to working with families and then that personal care as well. And by the way, Russell Singleton is one of those medical pros, a physician assistant, joining us in studio this morning from Dr. Tripp's office. A quick point to be made about this. When they come into family medicine, this is where it all starts because you're looking over people. So if they need to see somebody, a heart specialist, they start with you. Or if they need to hear a hearing specialist, they start with you. Or if they need a vision specialist or a throat specialist, everything starts in family medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's true whether or not the person knows they need a hearing specialist or a heart specialist. Sometimes people come in because their insurance company requires it and they need a referral. But sometimes people come in with chest pain or, a complaint that they can't hear their grandchildren anymore. And in family medicine, we're often the first line, and there's a lot that we can do. But then when we feel that it's out of our scope, we use professionals that are here locally that can take it to the next level.
We wanted to point out as well that this situation in Texas reflects on an area of medicine because even in family medicine, you're dealing with broken bones and you're dealing with sometimes puncture wounds and the like. But what they're going through in a disaster, any disaster area, usually is that multiplied by 1,000 times.
Absolutely. I think it has a lot to do with preparation too. And in fact, what I wanted to do today was talk a little bit about preparation. We had a similar discussion, Bill, back in January when those earthquakes hit central Italy, and we talked a couple times about disaster medicine, disaster relief, how things might occur in such a situation. So now, 8 or 9 months later, what have you done about it? Are you prepared? So I've got a list of items that you might want to have either in some type of a disaster kit or a go bag. And we're going to check these off one by one, and we can talk about them as we go and why they're important. But keep a mental list in your mind. Do you have these things? Are you ready as far as these individual items go? What do you need to do to get there?
I was going to say for most people who, in this situation in Texas, they had so little warning. A lot of them, I saw them just walking through the wasty water with a plastic garbage bag with whatever they could grab, usually just a change of clothes and maybe a loaf of bread. But if you have something already prepared that you can quickly pull off a shelf and take with you or out of the pantry, which is really what you should have in place.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, to get started, I want you to imagine that you're at wherever you're at, and you're listening to the radio just like this, and you hear something along the lines of "Attention, attention! This is the emergency broadcast
Mhm.
system." There is a natural disaster in your area, or it could be maybe civil unrest, violent protest, wildfire, anything. But the voice will go on to say you are ordered to evacuate. What do you do? Are you driving to work right now? Are you at work? Are you at home? Do you know where your family's at? Do you know how to get a hold of them? What is your next step? So let's start going down this list and maybe talk a little bit about each one. But the first thing that you're going to want to have available to you, either at home or maybe in your vehicle or wherever it's convenient, is water. So, Bill, if I asked you how much water you think you would need to have on hand in the case of, I don't know, let's say a civil unrest where you simply can't get to the grocery store, you can't get out of town because of protests. How much water do you think you need to have on hand?
Does that mean I don't have to shower?
That's a good question, actually. That
Because I
is,
would say 100 gallons would get you through a couple of weeks if you weren't bathing or showering.
Well, that's a great point. We need water not only to drink, but we need it for cleaning. We need it for sanitation. So one of the general recommendations is about a gallon per person per day. You mentioned 100 gallons. That's a lot of water. That's great to have. In fact, my family has about 150 gallons. We bought some large 55-gallon drums. It's made out of some type of food grade plastic. We bought some hand pumps to go with it, and they're full of water. We change it out every 6 months to a year to keep it fresh. But we've also got several of those 7-gallon camping jugs in our crawl space under the house that are all full of water. So I think altogether we have about 150 gallons.
We have to take a short break. We'll get back to this. I do remember I took a course one time where you take the 2 liter bottles and how you can purify the water in there and seal it and store it for a long period of time. And I used to have a closet filled with those. I just don't have the space any longer, but it's not a bad idea. We've got more coming up with Russell Singleton, a physician assistant from Tripp Family Medicine, right here in Twin Falls. We're at 70. It's 840 on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and News Radio 1310.com. Our studio guest is a physician assistant at Tripp Family Medicine in Twin Falls, Russell Singleton, joining us this morning. Better health with Tripp Family Medicine. And I'd like you to remember the slogan, life's too short not to feel good. Russell, for people who actually would like to get in touch with you or one of your coworkers at the office, how do they go about doing that?
933-4400. Give us a call. Talk to one of our lovely front desk ladies, and they'll probably get you scheduled for the same day if you call early enough. And if it's not the same day, it'll be soon.
And you're on Facebook and also a website.
Yeah, trippfamilymedicine.com, and make sure that's TRIPP familymedicine.com.
And I do want to point out, if you'd like to reach Russell today, 736, well, let me say 208 736 0300. That's an old habit, and we've got to add that prefix, 208 736 0300. Although I think most of you already know that. We were talking about people being prepared in case of a serious emergency, and we were discussing just water and things like that they'd have to have, and just water alone. And you got to get beyond that. You got to think, okay, what do I eat, and how do maybe I cook? And there are people who can direct you to a store where you can go in and you can say, all right, I need sterno and I need this and this. But after a while, you better have a long checklist of things you've got available.
Yeah, and it is all about preparation. When the need comes, the time for preparation is past. Now, I'm not the type of individual that thinks you should allow your life to revolve around this. That's not at all what we're talking about today. We're talking about really basic preparation. We're talking about what maybe tens of thousands of people in Houston could have done to be a little better off. This isn't to say that they wouldn't still be in harm's way and they wouldn't still be suffering in a terrible disaster, but they wouldn't be walking down the sidewalk in waist deep water with a garbage bag full of, just whatever they could find. And that's what we want to avoid.
We should point out too as well, a lot of these people, if they're taking medications, that's the other thing. You have to go to a shelter or another city to stay, and you don't have your prescriptions with you. You're going to be in rough shape.
Yeah, so that is on our list. Absolutely. Do you have essential medications? Do you at least know where they're at? Are they all in one place? Could you collect them quickly if you needed to? Because remember, you've been given 15 minutes to evacuate,
Hmm.
and protests are coming, wildfires are coming. You don't have time to search the house. You don't have time to go to the pharmacy and get a refill. You don't have time to start exercising and dieting and working on smoking cessation and weight loss and alcohol reduction. These things have to be done. And so taking charge of your health now is important. Making sure you have essential medications is important. And then what about pet medications too, or pet food and supplies for your pet? That's probably another area that is very easily overlooked.
Now, if you have a flood, as they're seeing it of this biblical proportions down there along the Gulf Coast, obviously most people are told leave. But if you have civil unrest, you're generally told shelter in place. In other words, don't go out into the streets. So it maybe changes. You'll have your prescriptions at home, but you may not be able to go back out and get them refilled. And you also have to have just enough of food and a way to keep your house either cool or warm. I know when there was a huge power outage in Maryland a few years ago, a friend's father, he was being taken care of in hospice care. He had cancer, was dying, but it was in summertime. The temperatures were upper 90s. and all of a sudden they had no way to keep the hospice where he was staying cool. And all of these issues come up. How do we? These are all things people have to be concerned about. It's not just the food and the water that you need, but there are so many other little details that have to be looked after.
Yeah, and just because you have extra water, for example, doesn't mean you know how to use it safely, how to avoid infectious illness. For example, I think most people know that they can boil water to remove a lot of the pathogens, and that's absolutely correct. But did you know that boiling the water will not remove heavy metals, that it will not remove larger contaminants like sediment? It's not going to remove a lot of chemicals that may be in the water from runoff as a result of flood. So, what would you do in that circumstance? Did you know that bleaching or chlorinating the water is also helpful for pathogens, but not for those other things? So, still, what do you do? How do you remove those larger components? It would be a great thing to learn how to do that and how to handle some of these basic necessities. Distillation of water is actually a wonderful method. You can boil it first, remove the pathogens, collect the vapor, and that's pure H2O. And that's a great skill to have. Practice doing that. On our list, if we continue down there, we talked about food. Do you have enough food for 72 hours? That's probably the basic rule. It may take longer than that to resume normal operation, but plan for at least 72 hours. Is it food your family will eat? If you've got days worth of MREs and canned pork and beans, that may be great. But what if you have children that won't eat that? What good is that? Let's say it's in a can and you don't have a can opener. Are you going to be able to access that? Infant formula. Do you have enough infant formula? Do you have, again, pet food or pet supplies? We talked about essential medications. Next up on our list is a hand crank radio. So these are pretty cool. These are often NOAA certified. They're able to receive weather alerts. They're able to receive these type of emergency broadcasts. They also have flashlights usually on them. And there's one on Amazon right now for $27. It is very cool. You can crank it. You can use it to charge your smartphone, actually. And it's even got a solar panel, small solar panel
Can
on
I
it.
mention, since we talked about disasters after the earthquake, this subject came up, and on your advice, I went out and I bought that.
Did you?
Yeah.
All right.
And it works wonderfully. I mean, you don't have to crank it long. You get the light, or you can turn on the radio. And as you say, it's got the jack for the cell phone charging.
Yeah.
So, if you had to bug out, for instance, and you're up in maybe the South Hills, here is a tool that can keep you in touch with what's going on via maybe radio, but you could also have the cell phone if you need it. And some places obviously may not have service, but I think if you were in the South Hills, you'd probably be fine still. But you've got and the light, which you may need at nighttime if you're looking for something.
Absolutely. So do you have a go bag? You talked about bugging out. Are all these things together? In our house, each family member has a backpack, and the backpack is full of a majority of these things, including food and some water or water filters in that case to make them more portable. But they sit right by the back door in our house, and every so often we have to go through these items and make sure they're not past their expiration date. I think that in and of itself is an important recommendation. What good does it do to have a bunker full of a 6-month supply if years down the road you actually need that and all that food is expired? Not everything's going to have a 30-year shelf life. And even if it does, have you used it within 30 years? Are you rotating it? I think that's another really important facet of food storage and preparation. It's got to be food your family will eat, and then you got to rotate it. You got to go through it.
I think that the other part of that too is a lot of people have turned to these freeze drying systems, but these are expensive. But if you can afford them, it's another great way to store things. But you've got to find a way just to ensure that it's not even about the freshness. It's just about making sure that this food has a good long shelf life.
I think that's absolutely right. Next up on our list is a basic first aid kit. Do you have a self-contained first aid kit? Are there bandages in there? Are there shears? Do you have some basic medications? Benadryl probably is an excellent addition to any first aid kit. You'll want some pain relievers, ibuprofen. Remember, if you have kids, you need to have special infant or child concentrations of these painkillers. Topical burn or itch creams like hydrocortisone cream or Benadryl also makes a cream. That's an excellent addition. Do you have a whistle in your 72-hour kit or in your go bag? Do you have a dust mask in the case of an earthquake or other weather-related natural disasters? Do you have something to filter out some of that contaminant? Shelter is important, and we haven't really talked about that so far. Food and water are obvious, but basic shelter is right up at the top of the list, right? A great simple idea to protect yourself at least from wind and rain is a roll of plastic sheeting and duct tape. You can filter out a lot of contaminants that way, and you can give yourself some basic protection against the elements and actually retain some heat as well.
Would you recommend one of these pop-up tents too? I mean, I've seen these advertised, and one of my coworkers said you just throw them down and they pop up on their own. At least it would keep you out of the rain, for instance, if you were somewhere and you had to stay dry.
Absolutely. Medically speaking, you're probably going to suffer more and perhaps die first from exposure to the elements before you actually starve or you become dehydrated. So absolutely, you've got to ensure adequate shelter. Along with that, some basic hygiene items like moist towelettes, garbage bags. Do you have some type of a multi-tool, a Leatherman with a knife, with pliers, leather gloves? What if you needed to remove debris, for example, or you needed to sandbag? Do you have some leather gloves? Do you have a hard hat or something to protect you in that case? Cash is important. The amount of cash is probably up to you, but we've got, I believe, probably about $100 in smaller bills in our 72-hour kit. Family documents, are they sealed and protected from water? Do you have everything that you need to establish identity, to establish ownership of insurance policies, for example? Change clothes. Do you have access to that? Is it ready to go? Fire starting supplies. How about books or activities? If you're in, if you're in Joel Osteen's megachurch right now and you're among 15,000 other people, you're not going anywhere for a while. There's
Mhm.
not going to be a lot to do. Do you have a book to read? Do you have activities for your kids? I think these are all things that we don't often think of, but hopefully we can start checking some of these off.
I wanted to point out, when you were talking about some of these things too, I saw a dramatization on TV some years ago about what would happen in the event of civil strife. And it was about a family, and they followed them as they had to flee California. And what they did is they literally made their house look like it had been ransacked. So people coming through the neighborhood ignored it, thinking, well, that's already been hit. And when they finally got away, they come to, I believe, Idaho. And it follows you through their life, but what happens is the father ends up getting a cut, a bad cut. It gets infected, and they don't have any way to treat it, and he dies from the infection. So when we talked a little bit earlier about medicines, there's also going to be, if you can find anybody somewhere who's a medical professional where you're going, maybe already have that contact available. That was a fictionalized account, but it was based on what could happen. So if you come into a situation like that, or I saw a movie where the father gets a bad cut from a chainsaw and dies. These are types of things you'd have to be worried about, especially if you're roughing it in some place where you're hiding out.
Yeah, it is pretty easy to get a basic first aid certification. It is easy, and within a couple of hours, you can get a CPR certification. Would you be comfortable performing CPR on a stranger if you had to? Would you be comfortable performing CPR on a family member if you had to? But you bring up another good point, knowing who might have skills, for example, who might be a medical professional that could help. Do you, first of all, even know your neighbors? Now, I know that that might be a controversial thing. Many people like to kind of keep to themselves and not expose themselves or their private lives. But consider first of all getting to know the people around you, getting to know your neighbors. you could perhaps find out and share if any of them have special skills. If one is a medical professional, one is maybe in law enforcement, one is a construction professional, you can then rely on one another and try and form a community plan. That's something we've done in our neighborhood, or at least we've tried to. We had surveys that we passed around the neighborhood that neighbors could voluntarily fill out and say, "These are my basic skills. These are supplies I have. Like, yes, I have a chainsaw, or I have, an axe or whatever. I have extra water to share." And I think all of us, especially those listening to this show, would want to be prepared and take care of themselves and their family first. But I think one of the greatest blessings of preparation is that you can help other people because you're good. You're okay. Now you can extend a hand and help those who either didn't prepare or just who are not fortunate enough to be in the situation you're in.
Yeah, there's going to be a big call for carpenters and other people who can do these, have certain skill sets in a situation like this. You'll see that too in Texas in the weeks to come as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I don't know if any how much time we have left or if we
30,
have any.
30 seconds.
Oh, well, darn, I was gonna hope to hear for some callers and maybe answer some questions, but I think I would just end by saying these lists can be found anywhere. This list that I used today, I pulled off of, I think it was disaster, or no, it was ready.gov. And that's a great resource if you need some basic information on how to build a kit, what should be in it, what basic skills should you have. Check out ready.gov.
I will take a look at that because, as I say, I was telling Russell off air that I used to have some of these things available, and then somebody told me to get rid of them. But we'll see you again in a few weeks in the rotation at some point.
Absolutely. I'll look forward to it.
Russell Singleton joining us from Tripp Family Medicine today. Short break for news from Fox at 9 o'clock. And then we expect to be joined by Raul Labrador, candidate for governor in Idaho, during hour number 2 of the program. That's on the way. Hope you can stick around on News Radio 1310 KLIX at newsradio1310.com.